Russia spent years turning occupied Ukrainian land into a launch pad. Warehouses, workshops, airfields, and air defense bubbles. Then, in a tight window of nights, Ukraine says it tore through that infrastructure with a coordinated three-part strike package that blended US missiles, UK and French cruise missiles, and a new Ukrainian long-range weapon. I am Walter Benson, and this is my channel, Walter Benson. If you value serious, verified conflict analysis, like the video, subscribe, comment, and share it now. Tonight, we walk through what happened between March 6th and March 8th, why these targets mattered, and why Kyiv argues this kind of record damage could happen far more often with only a limited boost from its partners. On March 9, the Kyiv Post described what it framed as a three-punch combination aimed at the backbone of Russia's long-range drone campaign in occupied territory. The logic was simple. Do not only chase drones in the sky, hit the places where they are stored, prepared, and launched. Ukraine's military has faced relentless waves of Shahed-type drones, and over time, the battlefield has pushed both sides towards systems thinking. Production, logistics, launch sites, and the air defenses that shield them. What made these strikes notable was the mix. Ukraine paired Western-supplied missiles with domestically developed long-range capabilities. It is a shift from isolated hits toward layered attacks that pressure sensors, saturate defenses, and then strike high-value nodes. The first wave centered on occupied Donetsk. On the night leading into March 7, Ukraine says it targeted facilities near the Donetsk airport area that Russian forces had been using since at least 2024 to support Shahed-type attack drones. Reports described buildings ripped open, fires, and secondary detonations that suggested stored material was cooking off after impact. This was not a symbolic strike. A launch site near the front changes the geometry of a drone war. Shorter flight paths mean less time for interception and less opportunity to force drones off course. Hitting that hub is an attempt to push the threat farther away, to make every future Russian drone sortie longer, riskier, and more expensive. Ukraine's message was that the problem is not only the drone, it is the system behind the drone. Ukraine's general staff said the Donetsk airport area was hit with a combined use of US-made ATACMS missiles and Scalp or Storm Shadow cruise missiles supplied by partners. The strike, according to Ukraine, was carried out by missile forces and artillery in coordination with the Air Force. The claim matters because it describes a deliberate integration of capabilities, not a single weapon thrown at a single target. Ukraine released footage, it said, showed impacts and heavy fires. By Ukraine's account, Russian air defenses in the area failed to prevent the missiles from reaching the site. If accurate, that is a direct challenge to the protective screen Russia tries to build around key nodes in occupied territory. It also shows a preference for destroying infrastructure outright, so repairs are not quick, cheap, or predictable. To understand why Ukraine is prioritizing these targets, look at the scale of the drone pressure. United 24 Media reported that Russia launched 5,059 long-range drones against Ukraine in February alone, a reported 13% increase over January. Business Insider also noted reporting tied to statements from President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying Ukraine has faced more than 57,000 Shahed or Shahed-type drones since the full-scale invasion began. Those numbers explain the strategic logic. Intercepting drones is necessary, but it is also repetitive and draining. Destroying launch and support sites is an attempt to reduce the flow at the source. Even if Russia can relocate, it loses proximity. Longer routes mean more exposure to jamming, air defense, and fighter patrols. And every extra kilometer adds friction to an already complex campaign. Russia's public messaging followed a familiar pattern. Ukraine presented its strike as a direct hit on Shahed infrastructure. Russia's defense ministry did not highlight a destroyed launch area near Donetsk airport. Instead, it emphasized claims of intercepting Ukrainian drones over multiple Russian regions that same night. This is information warfare, layered on top of kinetic warfare. When a loss is visible, the narrative often shifts to what can be claimed instead, usually air defense success, usually far from the scene of the most sensitive damage. What is left unsaid is often the point. Acknowledging a destroyed Shahed support hub in occupied Donetsk would mean admitting vulnerability in territory Russia presents as secured. And this was only the beginning. Ukraine did not stop after one hit. Within roughly a day, it returned to Donetsk with a different tool and a different purpose. The second wave came on March 8th, again in occupied Donetsk, and it focused on the Tokmash industrial facility west of the airport area. The Kyiv Post described smoke rising high above an industrial zone and witnesses reporting two powerful blasts. Ukraine's framing was that this site supported the Shahed ecosystem, including maintenance and storage functions that could feed operations tied to the earlier launch area. Then came the follow-up. A second hit on the same facility, described as a double strike, with secondary explosions that suggested additional material was detonating after the initial impact. Footage described by the Kyiv Post showed a multi-story industrial building with its center torn out. The damage profile was presented as inconsistent with a typical long-range drone carrying a limited payload. The implication was that Ukraine used a heavier, faster missile-class system designed for this exact job. That brings us to the Pelikan, described in Ukrainian-linked reporting as a new, domestically developed ballistic missile, also referred to as the FP9. The difference is not only technical, it is political. When Ukraine fires Western-supplied long-range missiles, it often faces restrictions and permission debates over where and how those weapons can be used. A Ukrainian-built ballistic system changes that equation. Reports cited claims that a Pelikan can carry up to 850 kilograms of explosive. United 24 Media reported that it is believed to have a range around 800 kilometers. If those figures are accurate, this is a major leap beyond many drone strikes in both speed and destructive effect. Ballistic trajectories also compress reaction time and can be harder to intercept. Ukraine-linked channels also claim strikes were supported by operations that destroyed Pantsir S-1 air defense systems along flight corridors, widening safe routes for follow-on attacks. Moscow's messaging after the second Donetsk wave again leaned on interception claims. Russia said it shot down large numbers of Ukrainian drones over occupied and Russian-controlled areas. It also claimed Ukrainian aircraft were destroyed, though those claims were not backed by independent confirmation in the reporting cited by Ukraine. What is clear is that Ukraine's reported targeting sequence fits a pattern. First, pressure local air defenses and blind spots. Second, strike the node that matters. Third, strike again before repairs or dispersal can take effect. And while Donetsk was absorbing this campaign against Shahed support sites, another occupied region was also hit. Crimea has long been central to Russia's air and naval posture in the Black Sea. Ukraine's third strike was aimed at weakening that posture, not with a single dramatic headline, but by pulling more capability out of Russia's hands piece by piece. In occupied Crimea, Ukraine reportedly struck near the village of Novozerna, hitting a naval port site and destroying an armed patrol boat. It is another small cut against a Black Sea fleet that has already had to adapt repeatedly to Ukrainian strike tactics. More significant, according to the Kyiv Post's description, was a strike on the Kirovska airfield, a site Russia uses to operate Orion heavy strike drones. Ukraine's claim was that control stations and the launch-related infrastructure were hit, including the destruction of 4 control stations. The broader Crimean pattern was also visible earlier. On March 6th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukrainian long-range drones struck workshops at the Yevpatoria aircraft repair plant and hit Pantsir S-2 air defense systems near Jankoy. The sequence suggests intent. Remove air defenses, then exploit the corridor. It is methodical, and it targets the enablers of long-range attacks, not only the platforms themselves. Taken together, Donetsk and Crimea point to a focused goal: reduce Russia's ability to sustain long-range drone campaigns by attacking storage, preparation, control, and protection. Shahed-type facilities and Orion drone nodes are not glamorous targets, but they are the machinery that keeps pressure on Ukrainian cities and frontline positions. Less drone pressure means more breathing room for Ukrainian air defenders and more capacity to focus on ground combat realities. There is also a tactical evolution here. The Kyiv Post described this as the first time Ukraine's military claimed to use ATACMS and Storm Shadow or Scalp in a complex attack, not as isolated shots. That matters because complex attacks can use decoys and drones to distract radars, while missiles take the clean line to the target. Some of Russia's own reported drone shootdowns may have been part of that confusion effect, though that remains speculation. Either way, Russia now has to assume the next strike may be layered, not singular. Kyiv's argument about the future is blunt. More Western missiles and fewer restrictions on their use would mean more Russian military nodes destroyed, faster. But partners still hesitate, worried about escalation and about maintaining control over how advanced weapons are employed. Ukraine is responding by scaling domestic options. In a March 10 Forbes article, David Kirichenko wrote that Ukraine has already struck as deep as 1,300 kilometers into Russia in 2026, and is increasingly using systems with more power than earlier long-range drones. That investment is producing new missiles and hybrid strike tools that reduce Ukraine's dependence on outside approvals. This time, the targets were Shahed support sites in occupied Donetsk and key drone and defense nodes in Crimea. Next time, the pressure could move deeper, toward assets Russia cannot easily replace. Subscribe to my channel, Walter Benson, comment your thoughts and share this video, because the map is not settled and neither is what comes after the next strike.